have to genuinely seek God's face. And he says in Scripture that that actually will lead to something. Matthew 23:37-40 says, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." All the law and prophets hang on these two commands. As I read this scripture, I can already see my selfishness coming through. Love your neighbor as yourself. Like God has already assumed that I have a lot of love for myself. And he's trying to make me understand how much I should be loving others. I've been stuck in this story in the Bible for a little while. And it's the story of Zacchaeus the tax collector. Now, Zacchaeus is a tax collector. He's living in a town, and Jesus happens to be passing through that town. And Zacchaeus is short, and he can't see Jesus, so he climbs a sycamore tree. And Jesus decides to stop in that town and actually ask Zacchaeus to come down from the tree because he's going to go to his house. Now, all the people in the town are actually extremely offended by this happening. But Zacchaeus encounters Jesus, and he ends up paying back everybody that he owes money to 4 times and gives away half of his possessions. Now, there is no doubt in my mind that if we have a face-to-face encounter with Jesus, it would lead to this kind of generosity. Jesus was passing through the town. That's what Luke says. If you want to find this, it's in Luke 19, 1-10. Jesus was passing through. That's one of the first lines in that scripture. But he stopped what he was doing to talk to Zacchaeus. But you know what my mind gets stuck on, church? My mind gets stuck on the fact that Zacchaeus is up a tree. See, here's a man who is corrupt, hated, unloved, and he can't get to Jesus because there's a crowd in the way. This is a man that needs an encounter with God's love, and he can't actually get to God because there's a crowd of people in the way. Do you ever think, church, that maybe we're that crowd? That we crowd around Jesus because we need something from him. When really we should be making a path for those that we know need an encounter with him. For those that we know need to experience his love. I think sometimes we work really hard to fulfill that first commandment, to love the Lord your God with all your heart. And we love him. And we crowd around him because we love him and we need something from him. But sometimes we forget to celebrate and facilitate him doing something in the lives of someone else. Because we want something from God. And we should be aware of the people in our lives that actually need an encounter with God. The people that maybe we have counted out from his love. That we have said maybe they're not worthy of his love. Or maybe we didn't even notice them in the first place because we're too busy thinking about ourselves. And I'm sorry if that offends you. But I think that we can't be a crowd that crowds in around Jesus. We actually need to be a crowd that seeks him and celebrates him and makes a path for those that don't know him to come to him. The fact is, when Zacchaeus' life was impacted by Jesus, that whole town was impacted. They were under corruption, financial burden. They were probably living in poverty. And they all wanted something from Jesus. But you know what? They probably got something better. Because Jesus freed Zacchaeus, and they were then freed from poverty. Jesus impacted one man's life, and that man's life changed a whole town. And you know what that town was? Offended that God picked Zacchaeus. Jealous. They didn't make a path. They crowded in around him. But really, Jesus impacting Zacchaeus' life meant that everyone's life was impacted. Because Jesus didn't count that guy out. He saw him and he loved him. and he welcomed him in. And then everybody felt God's love. Everybody felt Jesus. Imagine if everyone had recognized that Zacchaeus needed Jesus. Imagine if everybody had said, this guy needs you, God. Let's make a way. Do we know who the Zacchaeuses are in this room right now? Or do we walk in and out, fulfilling the first command, to love the Lord our God with all our hearts? But he says the second one is like it, to love those around us like we love ourselves.